now we're about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back. It's Warrior Creed with me, the radical Maajid Nawaz, and my brother, as always, the infamous Osman Raja. And as you can see, I'm not in the studio. I am currently visiting relatives abroad in a location that shall remain undisclosed. However, we've got a show for you today, and it's about the Trump indictment, an analysis as to what might be going on with that latest third, remember, indictment. There's expected to be a fourth one based out of Georgia. They're really going for President Trump. And we're going to connect that for you all to Imran Khan, who's just been arrested and detained and sentenced to 3 years in jail with a 5-year disqualification for running for office. And so, as those of you who are regular will remember with our analysis in Warrior Creed, it's interesting, the fate of Imran Khan in Pakistan, the anti-corruption, anti-globalist banker candidate. His fate seems to be tied with the fate of Trump in America. Every time there's a peak and a trough with Trump's fortunes, Imran Khan's fortunes seem to mirror those. It almost looks like a coordinated globalist campaign to do away with those anti-corruption candidates that have some form of popular appeal in their respective countries. I say almost, obviously I'm being slightly sarcastic because we here at Warrior Creed have been observing and noting every time that so-called coincidence plays out, and it's happened again. So the timing of it was at the same time that Trump was indicted. Imran Khan was convicted and disqualified for 5 years for running for office. So we're going to discuss those things, and then we're going to end up on an update for you on how the COVID-era health secretary in the United Kingdom, Matt Hancock, has just perjured himself in a UK court by claiming he'd never heard of midazolam, when we've got video footage that we're going to show you of him actually discussing midazolam with a prescribing doctor, Dr. Luke Evans, who was basically prescribing the procedure for the end-of-life protocol. So that's the live stream today. We're going to go through all of these issues. Forgive us if there's any sound or technical glitches while we're here. I'm obviously not in a professional studio. I'm using the available Wi-Fi. We have a view here that Warrior Creed should get out to you as regularly as is humanely possible, regardless of where we are. So you see me here in a hotel room setup, but we're going to carry on anyway. And of course, Usman is ready as always. If anything does happen on my end, bro, just pick it up, carry on, and I'll get back on as soon as I can. But hopefully it won't drop. Hopefully you can hear me fine, and this is all going to turn out well. So we're discussing today. We're going to start, as I said, on the Trump topic. This is based on the latest Radical Dispatch, which was just dropped last night, and there is the graphic for that dispatch. And you can see that if you go to majidnawaz.substack.com or at Maajid Nawaz on Substack, you'll find Radical Media, and we're discussing the topic that is the subject of today's analysis, and that is the latest third indictment of President Trump. This time the indictment was because they've accused him, which is an odd one really, of not accepting the results of the 2020 election, which, according to Jack, what's his face, the special counsel that's been appointed, it's according to him, it is a criminal offense to deny the results of the 2020 election, which is curious considering that the First Amendment to the US Constitution is free speech, and anyone can deny or accept anything they like as long as they're not directly encouraging or inciting acts of violence that has a causal link. The law and the Constitution in the United States should cover it. So it's a very curious one. But of course, as we know, people don't abide by the rules for themselves that they impose on all of us. And we know that because on this question of US elections, those of you who will remember my show on LBC, the UK's largest commercial broadcast group, Global, I had a show on LBC for which I was cancelled, unceremoniously humiliated by the national press as a conspiracy theorist, and then cancelled for raising this precise topic at the time. And that is the topic of the US election integrity. That's As you see there, the UK Guardian Sunday version of it's called The Observer. So that's in the UK Guardian on their website. The article, as it says there, is more than 2 years old, dated 31st of January 2021. And that is pretty soon after those November 2020 elections. The radio host has been criticized for his tweets on the coronavirus, that's COVID mandates, and the US election. So this is something that we've been following. As you can see, we've been on it from day one. It's all going to come to a head now. And the first observation to make is this one, which is the one that's in your face. Donald Trump was indicted before anyone on Jeffrey Epstein's client list. Let that sink in. And to make the point there 100% for you all, Ghislaine Maxwell is probably the first woman in US judicial history to have been convicted for trafficking underage girls to absolutely nobody. There are precisely 3 more indictments on President Trump, 3 more than any indictments on any of the as of yet unidentified clients of Jeffrey Epstein, those for whom Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for trafficking underage girls to. Who are they? Well, I do wonder, considering that the list of his clients is yet to be released. And instead, we have all of these indictments coming up against a former president. And those of you who say, well, Trump was probably on that list too, Maajid, on Epstein's in his black book, and he visited the island. My response to you is the following. Fine, show me the list. If you want me to believe he's on the list, show me the bloody list. If he's on the list, he's one of Epstein's clients, and you show me that list, I'll be as much as I am critical of all the others on that client's list, I'll be critical of him. But show me the bloody list. What was Ghislaine Maxwell convicted for? To whom did she traffic these girls? What was said in that court for those files to remain so secret that we're not allowed to even know who she was trafficking those girls for? And she remains in jail. So if she didn't traffic those girls to anyone, she's innocent. If she did traffic those girls to some people, show us that list. And if Trump's on that list, he deserves justice, just like all of the others on that list deserve justice. So there's no use saying to me, but Maajid, you're defending a man who was also on that list, because I'm not. I'm saying show us that list. And if Trump's on it, then he deserves to go down too. Just show us the bloody list. What are you hiding it for? What do you got to hide? You know? And so that's the real point there. And I think it's also curious on another note regarding that. Before we get to the meat, because there's some meat on these bones I'm going to bring up right now, which is fantastical. It really is fantastical. Guys, I wouldn't be talking about this if not for the fact we're already through the looking glass, right? These last 3 years have been mad enough that what I'm about to discuss with you, as fantastical as it sounds plausible considering all the madness that we've just gone through with Hunter Biden's laptop, the COVID mandates locking down 70% of the bloody planet, right? So don't forget, we've just gone through the looking glass. We're already in mad world, yeah? So in the context of mad world, what I'm about to propose in this conversation is the basis of the Radical Dispatch I just put out last night. Doesn't sound that mad. However, it's still just, remember this, it's just an analysis, but we're going to come to that in a minute. But before we do, here's another observation regarding the Trump indictment for all of you to pay note to. And that is this, that the timing of these indictments, as user and MAGA campaigner on Twitter, Andrew Clark, has noted, if you look at these dates, it's interesting. They say, there's a saying from the Roman Emperor days, and that is bread and circuses, yeah? To distract the people. What are they precisely distracting people from? Well, you can see from these dates, it's very curious. 17th of March, Hunter Biden admits that that laptop was his. 18th of March, Trump is indicted. That's the first indictment. And then you go back to the next one, right? So 8th of June, the FBI doc alleges that Biden accepted a bribe with relation to the Burisma Ukraine scandal. On the 9th, oh, look, Trump is indicted, right? Look at that, 26th of July, Hunter plea deal collapses. Oh, 27th, Trump is indicted, right? Look at that, 31st of July, Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's former best mate and business partner, testified. And the 1st of August, Trump is indicted. And if you look, those dates, it's not just a user on Twitter who's a MAGA campaigner. Fox News, corporatist mainstream media, is also noticing this timeline. There's a graphic from Fox Business with all those dates we just read out. It is incredibly, incredibly curious that Trump's indictments seem to follow the pattern of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the president, and their misfortunes that are unavoidably coming their way. And so the key thing to understand here is that who's in charge of the special counsel, the prosecutor that's after Trump? Who appointed him? It's no other than the Biden administration. And so, as is being alleged, if these charges are heavily politicized, and one way to understand that is, why wait 2 years to go after Trump for denying the elections in 2020? Why not immediately go after him for that? Why wait until the US primaries are about to begin if your prosecution hasn't been heavily politicized and you're not using the judiciary as a weapon to go after your political opponents in a witch hunt? You know, why wait so long? So you saw with that timeline, that kind of gives you the answers to why they're waiting. They are literally trying to distract you in the press from the misfortunes of Hunter Biden and his incredibly unfortunate laptop that seems to be the laptop of the century. You couldn't even make it up, the amount of shit that's on that laptop. And again, that's something we raised on LBC before I was cancelled. Usman, you'll remember that. We were discussing this laptop back in 2020 when the New York Post was banned on Twitter. We got the New York Post's comment editor onto LBC to discuss it while Twitter and the rest of the media had banned the New York Post, which is the oldest US newspaper, by the way, right? Ongoing, right? So the oldest continuous surviving US newspaper, the New York Post, was banned on Twitter. And there's us trying to have this conversation on LBC. And of course, we were, as we know, unceremoniously cancelled for raising those topics. But as we say, time is vindicating. We're not going away anytime soon. Now, moving to what I said was the meat of the subject here, there was a fascinating interview by somebody that sits on a Department of Defense task force, Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes. Now, I say she sits on a Department of Defense task force, according to her own testimony on live TV. Now, that's the kind of thing you can't really lie about on live television. The DOD is an incredibly serious entity. And if you're going to lie and bullshit about the fact that you're working with them, they'll probably come for you. So let's take it at face value that she's sitting on a DOD task force. And now the thing is, she was asked about this latest Trump indictment. Before I show you the video, there's a summary of the quote that she said. This is what she said, because I'm going to show you the video. It's a 10-minute video, but it's incredibly important. It's why I'm going to show you this quote first. So focus on these following lines when you watch this video. She said that the 2020 election is going to be relitigated over this. They made a huge mistake. Biden is president of what is now the bankrupt US corporation. That was a treaty in 1871. But on September the 12th, 2018, Trump created an executive order specifically for the 2020 election. Now, before I go to the video, remember she just said that the executive order is real, right? I'm going to show it to you guys. This is from the White House archives. This executive order is dated the 12th of September, 2018. Executive order on imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. In the Radical Dispatch that I've just pointed you guys to, that has this graphic, and you can go to Maajid Nawaz at substack.com to find that, and you'll see the text of that executive order. I've linked it in the article. This is the executive order. In 2018, Trump is reported to have signed that executive order in the case of foreign interference in the 2020 elections. In other words, 2 years prior. Now, the argument is alleging that Trump set up the globalist deep state in case the 2020 elections were interfered with, as Time magazine, by the way, admitted to, and we've shown you that on Warrior Creed multiple times. Time magazine said there was a globalist, well, I'm using the word globalist, there was a cabal that fortified the US elections. So in 2018, Trump signs an executive order saying, if that were to happen, then the following is what's going to happen. And he declares a state of emergency. Why is all this relevant? Because what the lady that sits on the DOD task force has now alleged publicly on Britain's GB News is fantastical, if true. And also, if true, totally game-changing and world history-changing, if true. But I'm just showing you what they're saying at this point. What we're not saying is put all your weight behind this theory. What we're saying is that this is now the front runner theory for the MAGA campaign, and the MAGA campaign is the front runner, undisputedly the front runner in the US presidential election, which means you better bloody take this seriously, because they're the guys that are most likely to become the next Republican presidential nominees for the presidential election, right? So half of the country is going to end up subscribing to this theory. So it's incredibly significant. So that's what we're saying. There's no use anyone watching this episode of Warrior Creed and saying Maajid Nawaz has gone all QAnon, even though, by the way, cheeky insert here, the logo for Quilliam was always the Q from 2000. That's a joke. Don't take that seriously. Right. So the logo was a Q. But no, the point is now here, watch this video and remember what I've just said. It is fantastical, but remember, this is the theory that is currently the front runner theory for the front runner candidate and his campaign in the US election. It's a 10-minute video, but pay close attention, and then I'm going to break it down for you all guys, and I'm going to show you supporting evidence for why this theory has legs. But before I show you the supporting evidence, I have to share the screen to show you the video. The video was too long to upload on Restream, so I'm going to show it to you via screen sharing on my own Twitter page. Stand by.
The side of the pond, should we? Because Donald Trump has hit back at prosecutors just hours before his court appearance on charges of trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
Yes, the former president said the indictment was unprecedented and showed the corruption of the Biden presidency.
Well, it's the third time in 4 months he's been charged, and as we understand it, probably not the last, as he campaigns to regain the presidency. Meanwhile, his son, his eldest, Donald Jr., spoke to Nigel Farage last night, and he questions the timing of the indictment.
You know, I don't believe any of this has anything to do with January 6th. If it did, and if January 6th was everything that they said, why, Nigel, did they wait 2.5 years to charge him? I mean, the people that were there that did those, they were charged that day.
Well, let's talk to Jan Halper-Hayes, who's a US political analyst, and he's here in the studio. Good to see you, as always.
Good to see you.
There's so many people putting this down as a political conspiracy theory, but actually there are real questions to be answered here.
There are?
Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are.
What he's being accused of, but what part do you think is to answer that the 2020 election is going to be litigated because of this? They've made a huge, huge mistake with this one, because even though we thought what was going to happen was they were going to go after him for treason or sedition, but they did criminally charge him, but they didn't go to that extreme. As a result, he has due process, so he can subpoena people and bring things in. Now, let me say something about this 2020 election, is that Biden is the legitimate president, but he's the legitimate president of what is now the bankrupt U.S. corporation. And that was a treaty in 1871. Well, on September 12, 2018, Trump created an executive order. Within that, he outlined in future elections any kind of foreign or domestic interference, specifically for the 2020 election. So we say, how did he know some of these things were going to happen? Election integrity on both sides of the aisle is tough. It's really tough. But what this has done is it's opened the door for Trump to present his case.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because, what we see on this side of the pond is a very difficult situation where the legal system is politicised in the United States, which is abhorrent to us over here. So the fact that Trump can subpoena, some people saying it's a mistake by Jack Smith, but actually he can subpoena, people can actually see evidence from both sides. That's a sensible move. Exactly.
And it's a great mistake by Jack Smith that he's done that. Absolutely great. See, the thing is, think about Edward Snowden and all the information he had. Think about the fact that our military, our Department of Defense Space Force, if you think that they don't have the actual real results from the election, then you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, but what we do know with this is we're told that there are plenty of notes from people, including Vice President Pence, that there are some recordings of Donald Trump acknowledging that actually what he said in public was nonsense. That some of these states, whether he claimed he was out saying look, Detroit, it's corrupt, it's all corrupt, the results are corrupt, and that when in reality he knew it wasn't. That's illegal.
But you know what? That's what someone's claiming, but that's not the fact, and that's not what Donald Trump really has ever said. He's been very, very clear. I mean, the issues were, for example, in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania stepped in and changed some of the election laws. Under our Constitution, it's only the state legislators that can do that. 2,000 Mules, the film that came out, what they did, they spent over $4 million tracking the phones. And the reason it's only 2,000 mules is that based on the visits to the drop boxes in Georgia, they had to have gone over 10 times. And they've got all the film for that. So the thing is that the election integrity is so different and so problematic in every single state. But that doesn't mean that the machines didn't do something, that there were some other kind of finagling. But the long and short, go ahead.
Well, it doesn't. But that's where conspiracy comes in, is it? To say, well, it doesn't mean that something didn't happen. Well, there's no evidence that it happened. I mean, there's how many court cases did the Trump campaign try to bring? Nothing's gone in his favour.
Okay, wait a minute. Everyone, the media goes, oh, there were 60 court cases that were rejected. No, there were 3. He won 2, he lost 1, 57 were never heard because they had no standing. And standing means that the person bringing the case has to claim some kind of impact or injury. So it's really, the media did that, and they're great at doing that, but it was a fallacy in there. And the thing is that, I sit on a task force at the Department of Defense, and the thing is, they've got the goods. They've got the goods, and Trump knew that if he presented any of the goods early on, we'd have a civil war. That he really felt that the people needed to see how bad it could get.
And that's the sense that we're getting from Trump's lawyer about what his defence is going to be. So this is all going to be based on free speech, the First Amendment in the US Constitution, that he had a right to say what he believed. And he believed that the election results were not as was put out. But the point is, if you live in a democracy and you believe in a democracy, then that means that even if you don't like the outcome of an election, you respect that, because it's a democratic vote.
Well, a democratic vote, and so therefore he should be silent about it.
No, he has a right to speak, but the issue, of course, is if he then acts to subvert that election result.
Oh, so that because you think he's being criticized because in Georgia he said, can you find me 12,000 votes? Or, the thing is, he didn't try to subvert anything. What he's really done is he set up the deep state to come out, and that's why we're seeing all these things. I mean, it was revealed with whistleblowers and Hunter Biden's ex-best friend that in 2015, the head of Burisma gave Joe and Hunter Biden $10 million bribe. In 2018, Joe is on TV publicly saying that he threatened that unless they got the prosecutor fired, that he wasn't going to let them have their $1 billion in support. In 2019, Trump calls Zelensky to find out about what went on to get the prosecutor fired, and he gets impeached. I mean, we've lived with it for a long time.
We're almost out of time. I just want to pick you up on one thing. You said earlier on, Donald Trump has been very clear on this. Is he a man that you believe? I mean, look, he's about as believable as a chocolate teapot, isn't he?
Look, I know that. Oh, thank God you got the negativity in at the end and not the beginning. I can always count on you for that, always.
But it's a legitimate point to say that Donald Trump is a man who always speaks the truth. That can't be the case. I mean, it's hardly the case of any leader, to be fair, but, I mean, definitely not Donald Trump.
Well, I don't know if I said everything or always, because I do call him the embellisher-in-chief, because he's a marketer. But in terms of telling us things, optics, you better believe that he's very much a straight shooter in terms of actions that he's going to take or what he thinks needs to be done. You know, they made fun of him because they assumed he broke protocol and walked in front of the Queen. No, if you go back and look at it, you will see he looked at her. She gave a wave with her hand. He proceeded. She took a couple of steps, he stopped, and he waited for her to join. That was an optic to tell us that he then was going to bankrupt the U.S. corporation because it was the Vatican, the Crown, and the U.S. that was part since 1871. And we were giving you our tax dollars. We were paying back. You know, forget this Tea Party and without taxation, without representation. We owed you a lot of money because you helped us in the Civil War. And so that is what Trump has now told the Queen, I'm ending this. We're dissolving this corporation. We're going to go back to being a republic and we'll all be separate. The Pope wasn't happy. You should find the picture of him visiting the Pope. It took 650 planes to remove our gold from the Vatican Bank.
I'm not very happy about it, Jan, to be perfectly honest. We could do with your money at the minute. Keep it flowing, I say. Albert Hayes, really good to see you. Thank you very much.
Now, the key point there's three key points to focus on what you just heard there. If you caught the line, Jan Halper Hayes, who says she's on a task force for the DOD, Department of Defense, she states explicitly, Trump is setting up the deep state. The second point to keep in mind is what she states there is that if you look at the three cities that dominate the globalist world empire, it's the City of London Corporation, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. That, by the way, so far is an accurate description of those three cities. The City of London Corporation, for anyone who's in the United Kingdom, knows that the City of London Corporation does not come under the Metropolitan Police. It has its own police force, and it has its own governance structure with its own political structure in this, what's known as the square mile. That's the square mile that was ring fenced because the IRA used to constantly attack with their bombs inside that square mile, which is the banking sector inside the City of London. It's called the City of London Corporation. It's explicitly called a corporation. That City of London Corporation, she's just stated, is connected with the Vatican City, which is also a city-state, not part of Italy, and with Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, which is not part of the federal system of governance in the United Kingdom. Jan Halper Hayes is alleging those three cities run the globalist empire. That's the second point to keep in mind. Remember, the first point was she stated explicitly, Trump is setting up the deep state. That's a direct quote. That was the first point. The second point is about the cities. The third point, she claims in that interview that the gold that she says belongs to the United States of America, but was being held by the Vatican City. And by the way, those three city-states, the division is assumed as follows. The finance for the globalist empire is controlled by the City of London Corporation. The globalist empire's military power comes from Washington, D.C., and their religious dogmatic hegemony comes from the Vatican, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. And also, do note, all three of these city-states have been embroiled in the paedophilia scandal. Right? Because blackmail is used to control politicians. And if you are running a globalist empire with those three city-states, you're going to need to use blackmail. So these are her allegations. Now, the third one I mentioned, she stated that the gold has been removed from the Vatican. Why is that relevant? Because according to her, the fiat currency is going to collapse very soon. These are implications of what she's saying. And we're going to return to the gold standard. And the BRICS have already initiated that movement. So I'm breaking down for you what is implied in that conversation if it holds true. Now I'm going to show you supporting evidence for that theory. Before I do, it's worth remembering, she's saying that Trump's setting up the deep state. How technically is that possible? Because she's saying in 2018, as president, Trump introduced an executive order, and remember, This is the executive order. You can go to Radical Media and read it for yourselves. It exists. This is the executive order. That's actually what it's called. And the date there is 2018. And the direct quote from that executive order states clearly that it's Trump is declaring a state of emergency. So if that holds true, and that's actually what the what she's alleged is true, and that Trump is setting up the deep state, then what you need to understand is he is still in charge. How would that legally be possible? Because that executive order, by declaring a state of emergency, would have something called continuity of government. In the case of foreign interference and occupation of the United States of America, the president, for continuity of government's sake, would remain commander-in-chief, but not president. And as commander-in-chief would command the military. And the military would then engage in a domestic operation to liberate the country from its foreign occupation. Who would the foreign occupiers be? The globalist bankers who have, through the Federal Reserve, been controlling not only the American economy, but the world's economy through the World Bank, the IMF, and all of these other extra national entities. So I'm just going through their logic by explaining the argument for you and showing you the evidence for their argument. And this argument, again, I'm going to state, isn't my argument. But why is it relevant? Because if the front runner for the US president is endorsing this argument, and if the generals in the military, in the US military, are endorsing this argument, then you bloody well better understand it, because they might end up being in the White House. And I'm about to show you where they've endorsed it. They've explicitly endorsed directly what Jan Halper-Hayes just said. And I'm about to show you that. But before I do, I'm going to explain the argument so you understand the impact of what's being said here and its sheer scale and importance, because this would be world-breaking if true, right? So if Trump is setting up the deep state, the argument would be that that executive order allowed for Biden to become president, allowed for them all to engage in the 2020 election fraud, because you can't arrest and convict people for the conspiracy until they've got their hands bloodied. And so that's what a sting operation is. And as Usman, as you know, in Britain, when it comes to counterterrorism, we don't use sting operations. We don't set people up, provide them with the weapons, and then convict them for attempting to engage in terrorist attacks with the weapons that we provided. But in America, they've been doing that for a long time. Even in micro terrorist operations, they will help someone get radicalized, provide the weapons, and then arrest them at the point of attack. And their argument is, well, listen, he clearly had the potential to become a terrorist. We just basically neutralized him along the way. So that's a sting operation. Now, what the allegation here is that in 2018, Trump, by introducing that executive order, declared a state of emergency, which, by the way, is the direct word in that executive order. It directly says, I declare a state of emergency. If you want to read the text, go to Radical Media, maajidnawaz.substack.com. I've printed the whole thing there for you with a link to its original source in the White House archives. And it says, I declare a state of emergency. So the argument would be that as president, Trump declares a state of emergency, becomes commander-in-chief, allows Biden to become president, and then allows them to do all of what you've witnessed over the last 2 years so that he can entrap them in a sting operation, which, according to this argument, is all about to unravel. Now, do keep in mind that it is incredibly curious that every one of the globalist narratives that they started off 2 years ago being so strong in has collapsed one by one. Think of Hunter Biden's laptop, COVID mandates, the Ukraine war. So they've been allowed to engage in each one of these three conspiracies, but now to a point where the public acknowledges finally that each one of these is a bunch of bullshit. Hunter Biden's laptop was real, despite 51 intelligence officers claiming it wasn't real, and Twitter and other social media banning the New York Post. So they've basically been caught red-handed lying, and they've been caught red-handed, the federal government, using social media to censor that news story of Hunter Biden's laptop. So you've caught them in the act with a criminal offense. COVID mandates. They've been caught red-handed, locking down 70% of the planet and injecting us with poison and telling us we had no choice, cancelling and sacking people that spoke out against it. They've been caught red-handed. No one's defending that anymore. Ukraine war, Sam Bankman-Fried. They've been caught red-handed, laundering money through that to presidential campaigns. It's all there for you, and the public is no longer denying it. The final one that is left is the 2020 elections. and US election integrity. And what Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes has just alleged is that if you prosecute Trump for claiming that the 2020 elections weren't fair, he has the opportunity in court to bring all of this evidence in his defense. And as commander-in-chief, with the DOD behind him, she's saying, remember Edward Snowden? She said, you better believe they have all the evidence. She goes, just imagine how much Edward Snowden has, and you think they don't know what happened in the 2020 elections? So it's an unprecedented, fantastical thing as an allegation to make this allegation. But if true, it's genuinely game-changing. And then she mentioned the gold being taken out of the Vatican and said, just remember when the Trump didn't look, when he met the Pope didn't look too happy when he met Trump. Well, here's the photo. And as is clear, the Pope really doesn't look very happy in that photograph. This is when Trump met him. So I'm showing you guys the supporting evidence for what the front runner for the US presidential election and the former president himself, therefore probably one of the most powerful men in the world, is alleging, right? I'm just showing you the evidence for what he's alleging. It matters he's alleging it because he's one of the most powerful men in the world and he's got the military behind him. Now, here is Trump explicitly stating that the US elections were set up. And then I'm going to show you another video of Trump, which is even more curious. But first, just watch. Trump has never backed down from the allegation, like yours truly. He's never backed down from the allegation that there was something wrong with those 2020 elections. Have a listen to this.
It was rigged. Everybody knows it. I don't mind if I lose an election, but I want to lose an election fair and square. What I don't want to do is have it stolen from the American people. That's what we're fighting for, and we have no choice to be doing that. We already have the proof, we already have the evidence, and it's very clear. Many people in the media and even judges so far have refused to accept it. They know it's true, they know it's there, they know who won the election, but they refuse to say, you're right. Our country needs somebody to say you're right. Ultimately, I am prepared to accept any accurate election result. And I hope that Joe Biden is as well. But we already have the proof. We already have tens of thousands of ballots more than we need to overturn all of these states that we're talking about. This is an election for the highest office in the greatest country in the history of the world.
Now, note there, bro, what he said. We already have the proof. He's alleging what Jan Halper-Hayes just said in that video. We've already got all the evidence. Now, where is it where Trump has directly endorsed that GB News interview that happened 2 days ago? On his own Truth Social account, this is where President Trump has stepped in. And he said the following. This is directly, again, this is linked in the Radical Media article, the Radical Dispatch. If you go to maajidnawaz.substack.com, look it all up for yourselves. Everything I'm telling you, just look it up for yourselves. I'll read this for you. It says, from Donald J. Trump's verified Truth Social account. Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes is fantastic. Everyone has got to watch her interview on election fraud with the poor sap who got taken apart by her. Thank you, Don Jr., for putting this masterpiece out for the public to see. Witch hunt. Now, you might say, okay, but you know, Trump's going to support a theory that supports him. What I find even more interesting, remember I said, if the DOD truly is behind this, then you're going to have one or two generals coming out supporting Trump. Well, General Flynn has come out and said explicitly that this is what's true. This actual theory is correct. Look at the top there. This is from General Flynn's Truth Social account. And he said, such a clear presentation of what we're facing, and this is the relevant part, what will likely happen. Our freedom must be guarded. So a serving former US general in the US military that clearly still has deep connections with the DOD is stating, yes, this is likely what's going to happen. Now, that is actually, if true, I mean, as I say, it's not just world changing or game changing, it's history changing. But I'm going to show you a newspaper based out of Washington, D.C. that I've done a podcast for called American Thought Leaders with Jan Yakulik. That's called the Epoch Times. They actually ran an article about this theory back, as you can see here, in 2022. The USA Incorporated reporter exposes how America was hijacked, turned into a corporation during the Civil War. Now, that article is also linked in the Radical Dispatch. If you go to maajidnawaz.substack.com, you can read it. But the last thing I want to show you here is what appears to be President Trump explicitly stating that these last nearly 3 years now, but what will be 4 years until the next election, are a setup. Now, have a listen to his words in this little clip where he states it had to be this way. We're in a pause that will last 4 years, because if we didn't do it this way, the people would never have believed it. Believed what? That the globalists attempted a global palace coup. Where did you hear that word before? Go back to the Rogan interview I did January 2022, and you'll hear me saying, in the peak of the COVID mandates, this is an attempted globalist palace coup against each government in each country. Well, have a listen to Trump pretty much spelling it out for you and saying that these 4 years after 2020 and the elections, with Biden as so-called president, are a pause that had to be done so that we could all see the truth, because we wouldn't be able to deny it if we witnessed it, how bad it could get during this time. Have a listen to this.
One of the beautiful things of the pause, if there is such a thing as a beautiful thing, but one of the important factors of the pause is that we see how bad they've done. So we will be able to do it properly, and it will be much easier. Everybody will agree with us, because everybody sees what a bad job has been done during this 2-year period, and it will be a 4-year period. Everybody sees that. It will be much easier for us to do what has to be done. And
now, you can't get more explicit than that. He says this pause, that is a 2-year period, and it will be a 4-year period. In other words, the 4 years between the 2020 election and the 2024 election. In other words, again, a supporting video clip there, backing up the theory proposed by Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes that this entire 4 years is a sting operation to capture treasonous globalists who have penetrated the cabinets. Sound familiar? Klaus Schwab, the clip I showed on Rogan over a year ago, Jan 2022, who have penetrated the cabinets of the Western world and thereby engaged in what I'm calling a global palace coup. And so if this does stand, it is all supporting evidence for the fact that globalists attempted a coup around the world using COVID mandates as a cover to basically fundamentally take over national governments for the purposes of creating a one world government under their various international entities. And again, if that is true, then this point here stands, and that is that every leader associated with the World Economic Forum should be removed from power and investigated for treason. And there you see Rishi Sunak and Macron, both of whom are known globalist stooges and the bankers' candidates. Macron selected by the banks in France, and Rishi Sunak, as we all remember, in Britain, selected by the banks after Liz Truss only remained as prime minister for the 3 weeks, the shortest period in history for prime minister ever. And the bankers engaged in a run against the pound and threatened to collapse the British economy unless that she was out of office. And then they brought in former Goldman Sachs banker Rishi Sunak. So this is the argument. I've outlined it all for you with the supporting evidence, and I'm going to repeat again, lest I'm accused of following the yellow brick road to Qdom. I'm going to repeat again for you the following. This is the theory, as I've just demonstrated, that is supported directly by a former president and therefore one of the most powerful men in the world, who is going to be the front runner for the Republican presidential race and therefore might be president again. He supported the theory I've just outlined for you, as has somebody who's currently acting effectively as a spokesperson for the US military and DOD, General Flynn. And then I've showed you the text of the executive order, and I've showed you clips from Trump pretty much spelling out the fact that this is a 4-year pause and it had to be this way, otherwise you never would have believed it. Make up your own minds, folks. What I'm saying is it matters only because they believe it. And they're telling you that's what they believe. And if they're telling you that's what they believe, what are they going to do? What actions are they going to engage in to show you that they're in the right? It's going to be a very interesting remainder of 2023. And I'd say to you, it's going to be an explosive 2024. So that is pretty much what's going on. And therefore, no surprise that Imran Khan has also been arrested in Pakistan. Aj TV They're reporting PTI chief Imran Khan has been slapped with a 5-year disqualification from office and a 3-year prison term. He's now serving, awaiting appeal in that. There is a graphic for Imran Khan slapped with 5-year disqualification and 3-year jail term, because he, like Trump in Pakistan, Imran Khan has been railing against globalist corruption and the way in which the global financial system has been pillaging the country, and the offshore accounts have been basically used by those politicians to take funds from the country and smuggle them into their own accounts for their own personal enrichment, precisely how Trump has accused Biden and both Joe and Hunter of doing via Ukraine. It's the same arguments playing out in Pakistan, and both Khan and Trump happen to be populist leaders. And in both cases, remember this, the military mass rank and file, not the leadership, not the corrupt leadership of the military appointed by the administration, like Biden appointed that transgender military person, former admiral, whatever it was. No. But the actual people in the military in both countries are supporting the leader that's being persecuted. And this is where I'm going to conclude by showing you. This is a statement from veterans in Pakistan. They put it up on a verified Twitter account. I'll read it quickly. It says, the arrest and incarceration of the ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan is yet another low in the history of Pakistan. It is unfortunate to note that the military high command is repeating the mistakes it made prior to the fall of Dhaka, capital of Bangladesh, in 1971, and later by removing PM Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, which is former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto's father, who was also PM, who was a very popular national leader. Pakistani army officers and Jawans, young officers, are crying the tears of blood while they lay their lives on a daily basis, and yet their institution is undoubtedly the most hated segment of the country at this juncture. Pakistani Ex-Servicemen Society, PESS, call upon the Army High Command, which is actually running the show in Pakistan through its puppets in power, to rethink their strategy, give people their right to vote and elect their government. The High Command is playing with fire and walking in uncharted territory. This is a very important line. Young officers and troops are demoralized and angry. The faith in the High Command's ability to lead is almost non-existent. Wake up before any rude awakening. It looks to me like we're going to see some incredible changes going forward in the year ahead, and it may well be history changing if the fiat currency does indeed collapse and we return to the gold standard. Usman, what are your reflections on everything you just heard?
Okay, first point, it sounds like a Dan Brown novel. That's not to discredit it, but yeah, it would make a great novel, that wouldn't it? So, first point here is, we're working from the perspective of grand narratives. So what we've got here is, okay, there's what Trump believes has happened. And remember, we're coming from the perspective of, we're watching it and saying, okay, there's gonna be action from what one group of people believes and what another group of people are doing.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, first point here we've got to get to, Maajid, is the corporation perspective, the historical perspective on this. Let's just say everything that's been said is correct. Yeah, and this has been some grand sting operation. Yeah, to watch the corruption that's been going on. The ramifications of that internationally with what we've talked about there, because remember, we've talked about the City of London before.
Yep.
On previous episodes, but the fact that the City of London is the only important part of the UK in the sense that I think they call it the Steel Mile, don't they? The part that's secured.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's around that you've seen the gentrification, and then what we're seeing with the rest of England is the petri dish that's being experimented on from the perspective of higher social control with the video cameras, with 15-minute cities, with the restriction of freedoms, with the higher cost of living.
Correct.
Yeah, so what we're not getting is the idea of something distinguished about being a British citizen. Rather, the British, what used to be the British citizen, is now someone who's part of a wider landmass that serves this square mile, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what we've got here is
which would seem to indicate Britain's been colonised by the City of London Corporation.
Exactly. Yeah, and something that we've been
By the
talking
way,
about.
all colonisation begins economically.
Yeah,
as we know, the East India Company in India.
National, as we talked about, the National Theatre play, which
Yeah.
which functions both from the perspective of what we know is going on right now. That's with the globalists and can't be denied. Yeah, the idea that the nation state no longer exists in the way that it used to exist. It exists from the perspective of creating intersectional identities and citizen control, in a sense. Yeah, now coming back to that citizen control aspect, Maajid, yeah, the narratives here.
Yeah.
Because these are grand narratives. These are novel standard, sci-fi standard narratives that we've got going on.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got the religious state in the Vatican who have been manipulating the ideology, and then we've got the financial control, and then we've got the biggest military industrial complex ever in the history of mankind with the US, which is something that can't be denied either. Yep. The point is with this, not regardless, but I just want to touch on to this point that if we go, when we've talked about this before, if we go back to the 1970s, when America was at its peak, and we had the shutting down of the trade unions, we had the shutting down of we had the shutting down of certain educational systems as well within the US, and bringing it to a more universal perspective. Because what was happening then was, when there was more fair wealth distribution going on, and when the meatpacking factories were a job that you used to have a waiting list for, and this is an actual fact in the 1970s, that you could work in a meatpacking factory in the US, buy your house, and come out with a good pension.
Yeah.
There used to be a waiting list.
And live a happy life, live comfortably.
Yeah, live very comfortably, in fact, yeah. And what started happening in the US at that time was, when people were that comfortable, people started going out and protesting against the Vietnam War, because what was found out, this is a fact, is that when people are happy, their circle of influence widens. They want other people to be happy. Yep. So what they figured out from a social engineering perspective, and this isn't conspiracy theory, guys. It's very, very easy to look into it and see that, and see what happened from a sociological perspective, was that they figured out that you needed people to be under a certain level of stress from their passion, provision, possession perspective, for them not to go out and start messing with foreign policy and what their country was up to. Yeah. So even when we talk about the Make America Great era that Donald Trump talks about, it harks back to this concept of the Reagan era. Yeah? But the Reagan era was actually the era that shut down the Great America. Do you see what I mean? Now, the reason I'm making these points are because I'm trying to demonstrate the concept of the grand narrative that drives people. Yeah, remember, Maajid, that when we talk about Steve Bannon and the concepts behind the Make America Great, the concept behind the idea of American morality and the American common man. Remember, we talked about the Judeo-Christian people and the belief system behind that, and the idea of what made society. And what I'm saying is, there's a grand narrative that's constructed there. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to get to with this is that we're not picking sides here. We're just demonstrating a narrative here that groups are functioning from. Yeah. Now, there's another aspect with this, which is the globalists that are very clearly, guys, make no mistakes, they're very clear in their agenda. It's a very clear agenda. It's not even conspiracy theory at all. What we're seeing with the Biden laptop, what we're seeing with Hunter Biden's laptop, and what we're seeing in terms of consequences, because the other point that we've always made on Warrior Creed is they're demonstrating to you that we do not care what you think. You have to do what we want you to do, or there will be consequences. We've seen the people that they've scapegoated. And scapegoat is a very interesting term because it talks about the goat that you've given to sacrifice. You've scapegoated. So we've seen, from whether it was the start with Hollywood with this interesting morality factor of taking out your previous go-to legacy media. Remember Hollywood, Disney, they're the ones that have been educating your children so far. And so what's happened now is those groups have come in, they've dismantled the heroes myths that were there before, and now they're being dismantled themselves within that public sphere. And we started seeing that happen we started seeing the fallibility of these groups with the Weinstein, the Me Too movement.
Do you remember the Ricky Gervais speech?
Who's that, sorry?
Did you ever see the Ricky Gervais speech at the Golden Globe Awards?
Yeah. I'm not saying anything. He's your friend.
Yeah.
And or the Dave Chappelle speech about this is an unpopular but I know you'll agree with me, Margin, that they should have let Spacey do the last House of Cards. He should have just done it for free.
Yeah.
It's just that we're going to punish you because they just ruined that entire series. But the point being, the Me Too movement, where you started seeing the fallibility of first they showed you the cracks. Remember even this idea of black emancipation to respectability. How did that get dismantled? People don't realize because everything happens at a subconscious level. Who was your first face for black respectability? Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Who slaps someone on stage? Who slaps another black actor on stage?
Yeah.
Will Smith with
Chris Rock. Sorry,
I forgot the name. Is that Chris Rock? Yeah. Didn't forget it on purpose. Great comedian. You got to give Chris Rock respect. Point is with this, what we start seeing the dismantling happen, and now we've got to this stage now with this, and I'm connecting this to all of this that's going on, Margie, with this whole movement now where you've got blatantly the YouTube algorithms bringing up all of these actors that are talking about the corruption of Hollywood. Now what you've got is the other side of this, where this legacy media, your go-to places for information are being dismantled, but now your go-to place for your governing is being questioned, dismantled, and also from that perspective being shown right in front of you that, well, actually national government isn't something that functions anymore. We've got to go to a more global perspective with this. But the problem is the other side. You see, you've got two bipolar opposites. But the problem you've got with this is you've been trained all your life for red and blue. You've got no critical thinking space in between. It's red, which is I go with a system that's already been tried and tested. You're not going to get the comfortable Chinese. Yeah, everyone keeps complaining about China. This isn't the Chinese system seems comfortable in comparison to what's coming with the globalists.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese system actually tells you, you do this and you get that. It's very clear, Maajid. Yeah.
Yeah.
This system's like quite vague and ambiguous in what it's pitching you. But the other side of this is pitching you Judeo-Christian, a grand mythos that's still
I think they're going for like a patriarchal kind of revival of medieval Judeo-Christian traditionalism.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's a mythos because what it's trying to do is it's claiming some egalitarian, merciful, liberal understanding while actually being rooted in a mono-religious concept. You remember mono-religion? Yeah, mono-religion was invented in Spain with the Spanish Inquisition, then Portugal, then you see it move across.
For the purposes of empire and dominion.
Empire and dominion. Now, the point is with this, we see the new Inquisition now, don't we? We feel the new Inquisition. It's like, eat this ham sandwich to prove you're a good Muslim.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem we get with this is that you need a higher level of critical thinking. But the problem is, since the 17th century, everyone's been made more stupid. Yeah. Everyone's been made dumber because the panic of, they've made you into a drone for the utilitarian system where you've literally got the bits of wood, which are your general knowledge. Yeah, it's like little bits of wood, Maajid, that your general knowledge. Then you light them, and that illuminates your reality.
Yeah.
But guess what? Yeah, it illuminates what's around it, but beyond it is pure darkness. But instead, you could just take the curtains down, and guess what? There's sunlight. And
look behind the curtain. Yeah.
Yeah, it illuminates everything. Point is, getting back to this point of consequence, because the other issue we've got with this is like with Pakistan. Pakistan's a great example of a slave nation. Yeah, I'm not talking about the people of Pakistan. I'm talking about you've got a tyrannical group of, it's in its decimals, maybe if we're being ambitious, 10 people. But the problem is,
yes, the elite in Pakistan who have pretty much captured the country.
Have captured it, it's the analogy of the concentration camp. Yeah, people always ask the question, how come the people in the concentration camp didn't just rush the guards? But it's very difficult when you're emaciated, you're tired, do you understand? When
and you lack information to coordinate.
Yeah. So what ends up, and we talked about this last week, Maajid, when you talked about the Sepoy Revolt of 1857.
Yeah.
That once again, these guys weren't coordinated.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't coordinated. Now, the point is with this that we're in a stage right now where we keep getting shown the consequences. Yeah, and one of the examples of this is what's going on in the UK with the high interest rates, with the high fuel prices, with everything else, but there's no coordinated resistance, and everyone is just okay, well, that's just the way things are. Yeah, but that's just the way things are? Because I guarantee you that as you climb that staircase up to the penthouse, they're living nice in the penthouse. They're living nice in Elysium. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. It's only you that's scrambling around for something to eat. So coming back to my point here of the grand narrative, because the point is here, Maajid, it's like, look, we know from a certain point of view, it's like there's, what we're asking the audience to do, where it's a case of, well, actually, guys, you've got two narratives here. One is slightly better than this one because this one is literally asking you, it's literally knocking on your door and wants to take away any idea of what you determine to be a good life.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is to grab your children and even take away the certainty of what a role can be, because your ambitions are based on parameters for what you can reach. If I say to you, there's no staircase, and you say to me, well, what is there? Well, and what I mean by this is, like the idea of a gender role is like a staircase. It's just a perimeter for you to behave and climb up to wherever you want to get to. Yeah, that isn't the be all and end all. Yeah, what we're talking about are parameters that allow you to climb. Because if I bring you a bowl with things that look like berries, if I said to you, Maajid, here's a bowl, and you go to me, oh, they're berries. I just went out into the woods and picked out what looked like berries.
And I'm not going to tell you whether they are or not.
Yeah. Are you going to...
You can self-identify them as berries if you like.
Yeah. But what are going to be the consequences of you tucking into that bowl? You're going to die.
No matter how much you fantasize about them being berries or not being berries, they may or may not be, but you're going to live with the consequences.
And there's a certain reason why we stick to the wisdom of the tradition of humanity, because over generations, someone else or some other people have gone out there and picked those things that look like berries. And guess what? Uncle Bob didn't come home.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And we were like, okay, that wasn't a berry. That was the price of figuring out what a berry was.
Yeah.
And this is why, in the tradition, we have that thing of knuckle to uckle. It's like you imitate until you get to a state of the collective intellect.
Yeah.
And they say that most of humanity will never, ever reach a state of collective intellect. So just imitate. It's the easiest way to get to a state of excellence. And it's not even saying that imitation is weak, because what it's saying to you, look, if I start as a carpenter, if I've learned carpentry from a master carpenter, if I start from where he finished, I increase the excellence.
Yeah.
So this mastery here is more than here.
Yeah. And by the way, you could end up with that guy perfecting the art of carpentry, yet still never becoming like that master who ikhtara'a in Arabic is like who innovated the skill in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, you've got to recognize that not everyone is going to be the innovator, right? So they come along in each field occasionally, and they should be celebrated and recognized until the next one comes along. But the safest thing to do is stick to that tried and tested path that has been carved out, that allowed them to get to that state of excellence by imitating or knuckle that process. And instead of thinking that we don't need that ladder in the first place, which is where we are right now.
Which is horrific, Maajid, because it's like, what people don't understand is you are always imitating someone.
Yeah.
So even this idea that you think, okay, I want to go and get my nose pierced.
Yeah.
Well, where did you get that idea from? I want to go and get a tattoo. Well, where did you get that idea from?
Yeah.
Every idea that's in your head, you got it from somewhere. Even these guys that are like getting themselves tattooed and getting like bits of their body removed.
Yeah.
Guess what? You saw that somewhere.
Yeah.
The concept that you think, oh, I'm being completely original. Yeah, you might be the first one that's stupid enough to amputate something from your body, because the guy that you watched on some Star Trek was just had prosthetics on, or it was CGI.
Yeah.
You're the Dumbo that's dumb enough.
Assume that for reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the problem now, that there's a point now where everyone thinks everyone's opinion matters, but they're not understanding. I can see how much wood you've got in front of you. And literally, you might think you've got a bonfire, but all we see is kindling.
Yeah. Well, so on that point, it's why it's important to recognize, look, we wouldn't raise topics like today's one. And I don't recommend people try this. If you're not used to sifting through information and discerning which information is relevant and which information is mere distraction, then you're going to end up looking like a fool if you attempt to sift through this information and present by the end of it something that is needed for people to hear. We wouldn't be presenting today's information if it wasn't two things: supported by enough substantiating evidence for us to say this should be at least taken seriously at face value as something that people believe and think is real. And then two, that those people who believe and think it's real are in positions of power important enough to act on it and therefore affect your life.
Yeah.
That makes it incredibly relevant for everybody watching, because if President Trump and General Flynn get into power, because Trump in power will appoint Flynn as his Secretary of Defense or whatever position he gives him, that's pretty much a given that they're allies. If President Trump and Flynn get in power and they're saying this is what they're going to do, when America coughs, the world catches a cold. And so this is, think of the consequences in Pakistan for those of you following Imran Khan. And we know the closeness between and cooperation between the US military and the Pakistani military. So the point here is that we've just shown you these people believe or say they believe this view. And if they come in power, think about what they're going to do to enact this view, because that will directly affect you immediately. The interest rates that are raising your mortgage by £800 a month at the moment is a direct consequence of the spending during the COVID mandates, when they locked us all in our homes and they printed money to give furlough. In other words, give a whole bunch of cash to people for sitting at home. The printing of the money in 2008 when the economy crashed, the decisions made by the UK Central Bank of England and the US Federal Reserve when they print money directly affects you. That £800 a month that your mortgage has gone up is because of that decision. It's a direct consequence. And so we're raising these topics because we have to see how these grand narratives filter down and affect your reality immediately and directly. And if you misunderstand the grand narrative, if you misdiagnose it, if you have the wrong framework with which to view the world, you will be misdiagnosing your everyday individual problems and looking at them also through the wrong lens. So, for example, instead of understanding that the rampant inflation is caused by money printing, that the decision for which was made at the after 2008, and then also because of furlough during the COVID mandates, if you misunderstand that inflation that you're feeling in your pocket is caused by the money printing, and that the interest rates spiking up to try and control that rampant inflation have caused your whatever £800 a month increase in mortgage. If you misunderstand all of that and think instead that inflation has gone up because we are basically buying too many goods from from expensive countries. If you completely misunderstand what's going on, the actions that you encourage people to take will be wrong.
Or if they say there's migrants, Maajid, I was just going to add that. But go that's the prime example. Yeah,
precisely. Yeah, go for it. No, elaborate.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because what we've got right now is we've got people being manipulated, and this is the issue with this, that even what you've heard is making you think in a certain way. It's getting you involved in the grand conspiracy. Yeah, and it's fine to understand, to look and go, okay, those people are functioning from that narrative. And you have to remember that in the work that we did, when we were dealing with Al-Qaeda or ISIS, okay, this is their narrative. Okay, what's the narrative of that group over there? Yeah. So when we were looking at what was going on with the whole region with Iraq, with Syria, we were saying, okay, This is what Assad believes. This is what these little groups over here believe. This is what ISIS believes. And we're looking at their narratives and what is the end point of the narrative? Because what you get with this is, it's like, what is the vision that they've got? Yeah. What is the vision? And that vision means they'll make these moves. Now, the problem that happens here is if your vision means that you need mobilization of a certain group, how are you going to mobilize that group? Now, it's very easy to mobilize a group by playing the blame game.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say to people, okay, it's because they're doing it. Yeah. And that Hitler knew this. Yeah. When he came into power, he said, oh, the Jews did this, the Jews. So what anyone that wants to come up with the easy conspiracy will go to the Muslims, the Jews, the this,
we've seen that play out over the last few years, right?
Well, we've seen with Modi, with China, with France, and all of a sudden, what ends up happening is that even your common sense will leave you, because it doesn't matter about your personal interaction, because these grand narratives will drown your common sense. Yeah, will drown your daily interaction with the what if this is real, because generalization is a very simple. Do you know why people like generalization? Because generalization connects to a determined result, and we like a determined result, because what determined result means is that within yourself you find a sense of permanence within your imagination.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it's very uncomfortable for me to say to you, okay, well, actually, guess what? In 5 years' time, the world won't be the same world that we think, that you even think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's actually, for me, it's actually quite exciting, isn't it, Maajid, to think, in 5 years' time, the world won't be what we think it is.
Well, if you look at it from the perspective that, certainly put aside the theory, and that's what I've been referring to it throughout this. Again, I want to emphasize, please, people, understand what we're doing here. We're trying to explain for you what the powers that be, with their various competing factions, what they're saying about themselves. You can't understand the world unless you understand what they're saying about themselves, both to each other and to themselves, right? So how they view themselves in this grand narrative and how they view the other. You're going to get lost if you don't understand that. So again, I'm going to repeat that we're explaining to you the theory that this is what's going on in their own words. Now, if you understand that, one thing that can't be disputed is, as I mentioned on Rogan Jan 2022, is we're in an unprecedented moment of a shift, historical shift. It's going to be one of those epoch era defining shifts, like when the invention of the printing press came along. So if you recall back when I said that the printing press's invention led to the 30 Years' War before the dust settled, and we ended up with a new sort of a new social contract. The internet today is the equivalent of that. Why? Because it increases access to information with all the evils that comes with as well, such as the printing press basically making everybody think they could invent their own version of how to be Christian. And you ended up with the Adventists, the Baptists, and all these other, and they were fighting over which version was right, because you had democratized access to the Bible. And the reason why that took off is because the Bible itself, before it was democratized and therefore people could read it by printing it and giving it out for free to people, it was abused by the Vatican Church for the purposes of power and corruption. So only when you abuse something do you open up the appetite for something else, which comes itself with a good and a bad, right? So the bad was you ended up with all these know-it-alls that thought they could dictate religion to everybody else because it's in the Bible, don't you know? And the good was you ended the corruption of the incredibly corrupt hierarchical Vatican Church. Well, I say ended, that didn't end, but you kind of reduced the power of that side of corruption. So everything is a dance. Now, the internet today has done the same thing. By democratizing access to information, you have, again, all these people that are attempting to use democratized access to information to, for example, incite against Jews, Muslims, or anything else. And you see all that online. You had that Nick Fuentes' character get on Rumble. He got on Rumble and he decided to continue speaking in a way about the Jewish community until the stream had to be shut down. And then you had Musk on Twitter saying, ha ha ha, Rumble doesn't believe in freedom of speech. It smells to me like the entire thing was set up to discredit Rumble and try and test the limits of them allowing conversations like this on their platform, because we know on Twitter, these sorts of conversations are heavily shadow banned. But anyway, the access to information comes with its pros and cons. One thing we know that it does do for a fact is it defines a new era. So at the precipice of this fourth industrial revolution, where we're at a stage now where there will be some form of global reset, whether it's Klaus Schwab's version or whatever comes about through rejecting Klaus Schwab's version, there will be a new social contract globally. The BRICS nations are already making those moves. Russia has already made gestures to returning to the gold standard and linking the ruble to gold. China negotiated peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Unheard of up until this year. So we're already seeing those, the consequences of rejecting Klaus Schwab's Great Reset is a new social contract emerging around the world, around the BRICS nations. We discussed last week about Niger. And since our discussion on Warrior Creed last week to now, we said, look, France is preparing to militarily intervene. Since then, we've had even more evidence emerge. Nigeria's government siding with the colonialist Macron and the others like Burkina Faso saying, if anyone intervenes in Niger's affairs, we're going to declare war. So that's become another flashpoint. However that settles, when it settles, we'll end up with a new social contract about the relationship between African states and their economic colonial or neoliberal masters, such as Macron in France. But you can't divorce any of that from the migration flows, because war and conflict in, say, Africa affects you directly with those migration flows into Europe. And that's why you find the narrative focusing, instead of focusing on, hey, what are we doing in Niger to upset the people so much that they need to A, coup the government, and B, run from the war that may ensue and seek sanctuary in our country. What are we doing there that's causing those problems? Instead of having that conversation, remember, we discussed last week that they've got to pay 50% of their reserves to Macron, right? That he keeps in gold in Paris as some form of post-colonial arrangement. And then you wonder why they can't develop their own economy when they have to both give all of their natural resources to France to power their uranium, that is, to power their nuclear energy, while also giving all of their reserves, 50% of their reserves to France. Of course, they can't bloody develop their own country. And you got, what was it, off the top of my head, 82% or something of the country that goes without power, without electricity. And you wonder why they're so upset and why they're leaving and seeking asylum in the West. And instead of having that conversation, we're having a conversation about, oh, look, they're taking over our hotels. And so you got to zoom out a bit and realize what's going on before you start getting lost in these there are problems. Let's not deny that, it's an issue if a town has these flows of migrants and people suddenly feel out of their comfort zones. Of course, it's real because it affects them. But understand what's going on.
Yeah, because the thing is with this, Maajid, that this takes us back now to, so you've got the grand narratives and then you've got the messengers in between that are pitching how you should be feeling about it. Yeah. So like people. So we'll put ourselves there as that as well. Yeah. But the point is, it's like when we get to the points that are made nowadays, we're in the best economic time. We're in stop complaining, stop moaning, stop this is to do with our society, our civilization, and the issue with this is, guys, we're still in that state. People in Africa are they're still living within that colonized state. They're still living within the hegemony of people that are invaded and enslaved. Yep. So when we talk about this idea of, we're in the best time ever, why are people complaining? Yeah, and then we get onto this idea of some false idea of like masculinity and hierarchy because we deserve it. But France deserves the gold from Africa, because, and then we get into that state of dehumanization.
Now think about the promotion, because I always say this, and you'll know what I'm talking about, Osman, that everything is appropriated, right? So think about the sudden encouragement by certain factions online of promoting a form of masculinity that glorifies collecting wealth, collecting women, and not giving a shit as a man about anything else, right? Think about why you would want that narrative to be popular.
Maajid, I've got you frozen over here.
Are you back? Yep,
yeah,
sorry.
I'm here. I got you frozen. Did your screen freeze for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, you're frozen again.
So I'm going to carry on, and I think we can get through this because we're near the end of time anyway. So, but I'm saying that if you think about the promotion of a form of masculinity that glorifies, I think it's still the. I think it will catch up with us in a second. So let's just carry on. If you think about the form of masculinity online as being promoted by certain quarters that glorifies accumulation of material wealth, accumulation of women, and believing that it's a man's right to accumulate these things of a good man, right? And you compare that to, as I say, few can dispute, my brother Osman here, for me at least, is an example of a good way to be a man, right? But that isn't what you promote. It's not what as rich as possible, become any women as possible, and that's our right as men. That's not what we promote. But you see that narrative being promoted online by certain quarters. Again, understand something, folks. That is a very convenient narrative for empire, because
and civilization. Sorry, just to add on to that, Maajid, is this civilizational superiority aspect that's also being put across by certain, as I said before, the Judeo-Christian television channels. Do you see what I mean?
It's back to that. It's a very convenient narrative for the requires a minion that we're losing the stream again. But anyway, listen, we're at the end of the show. Before we go, I'm going to move to the last topic quickly, and it's just as an update really on that Midazolam story. Lots of people have been following this, and that is that because Matt Hancock was chased around London Underground, accusing him of murdering people in the care homes with the end-of-life protocol, morphine combined with midazolam. Matt Hancock became so offended, he decided to sue this character for death. Argued, and here is the best of it, that he'd never heard of midazolam. And so you can see here at the top there, 2nd of August 2023, it says Mr. Hancock said that Terriani was within his comfort zone as he yelled, "Why did you kill so many people with midazolam?" Of a conspiracy theory that is spread on the internet by people who don't believe that a vaccine should be taken, so-called anti-vaxxers. A part of the conspiracy theory is that I intentionally killed people with a drug called midazolam. Even heard of midazolam until this item was brought to my attention. So that's the 2nd of August 2023. However, we're going to show you video from the 17th of April 2020, 3 years ago, when Matt Hancock is explicitly discussing midazolam. And therefore, it appears that Matt Hancock has just perjured himself. We'd never heard of death row drug midazolam, which, remember, the allegation is that the UK state, as a matter of policy, used to involuntarily euthanize the elderly under the cover of COVID deaths. Ago, I think it was, if you already agreed 2 weeks. Nicola Sturgeon is currently being investigated by Scotland's homicide police precisely for the now 5,500 deaths in Scotland's care homes that were used with the COVID deaths was a cover, but they died from other than COVID when Scotland's homicide police for that because invested by him was used. So Hancock has just denied that he'd ever heard of the drug. But here he is 3 years ago in a parliamentary video call, pretty much discussing the drug.
Good death needs three things. It needs equipment, it needs medication, and it needs the staff to administer it. So in terms of equipment, a few quick questions. Do you have enough syringe drivers in the NHS to deliver medications to keep people comfortable when they're passing away?
Yes, we do. There was a challenge raised about this about 8 days ago, and we resolved. Actually, it wasn't as big a challenge as was made public, and we've resolved that. So yes, right now we do.
And the second one is with that's the syringe drivers deliver medication, particularly things like midazolam and morphine. Do you have any precautions put in place to make sure we have enough of those medications to be delivered?
Yes. We've got a big project to make sure that those sorts of medications, as well as the ITU medications that I spoke about earlier, that the supply chains, the global supply chains for those medicines are clear. They are, in fact, those medicines are made in a relatively small number of factories around the world. So it is a delicate supply chain, and we are in contact with the whole supply chain.
And in line with that, morphine is currently prescribed per patient. The reason to do that is to stop it being abused. So I have to prescribe it for Mr. Hancock. However, in this situation, if you're going into a healthcare home, you may not want to waste precious things like morphine. Have you considered relaxing the laws around morphine prescribing for doctors and healthcare professionals so that there isn't waste?
That's something that we keep under review. I've looked at that particular point to reduce wastage of key medicines, and it's something that the supply team, in the department and the clinical team talk about all the time. I don't know if that's JVT's part of the clinical team, and he may want to say more.
Thank you. I've nothing really to add on that. Okay. Thank you, Rosie Cooper.
Again, sorry for the connection issues, but we are up to the end of the show now, so it won't be long. But that was called to Luke Evans, who was discussing the protocol, the end-of-life protocol with him. And on that call, as you saw there, was Jeremy Hunt, who was also a former UK Cabinet Secretary, as well as who he referred to as Matt Hancock has just perjured himself in a court of law. It's not going away. Keep an eye on it, because I think it's only going to get bigger and worse for Matt Hancock. It may well be the thing that brings him to justice. And as you know, we've been all over that story here at Warrior Creed and via Radical Media out on us. But it's been a fantastic completion today. As always, we'll be back next week, Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. EST for Warrior Creed here on Rumble. Catch the article itself for you for Radical Media. Look at the headline. It is pretty much on www.maajidnawaz.substack.com. Radical Media by Maajid Nawaz. A Trump indicted again, but is this entire saga a MAGA? And fantastic. Another issue with the connection. Are you frozen there, Osman?
No. I'm good over here. So it frozen on your side. So
yep. All right. Well, we're going to call it. Any last words?
Don't believe the hype. That's it.
Don't believe the hype. Your last words were cut out.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, folks. Thank you.
Now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Good service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.